you cannot have a proper accountability of the regulators unless there's a clear policy that is set somewhere else, be it in a ministry or a cabinet, or in many places it's set. But we do need that policy, and there's got to be more than just an elaboration of a policy, enunciation of the policy, but the different arms of government have to work together towards that policy, towards implementing that policy and meeting the targets of that policy. And that also is a big challenge in some of the markets in Africa that we're in, where, you know, the policy instruments are very rudimentary, where the machine of government is often just a president and a prime minister, sometimes a minister, but really not too much in terms of a deep and effective administration backing up those policies. Give you an example. In one country in Africa, we were called in with all the other operators to meet the president because he had heard that there was no appetite for the 3G license that he wanted to float, and at the price that they had set, which was extremely high. His message was, I want broadband for all the people in my country, and I want it now, and you guys have to help me with it. No realization that, well, one reason we were not so keen was that the price was too high. The industry structure was being kept as it was, and limits on consolidation, and all kinds of impediments. But, you know, there's no one to talk to. We're the president of a republic, and we, in all the markets we work, we do respect the laws and regulations and the governments we work with. You can go only so far to make yourself heard, to make an impact. And I think it was probably a very frustrating meeting for both parties, because no one got across any points to the other, neither the president nor the operators, and it was just, you know, the dialogue of the deaf. And this is not the kind of thing that will help move the agenda forward. However, with the new internet model, the fact today with the higher demand for downloads and uploads, it just makes it so much more difficult for us to have this kind of transparency. We do have three parties to this transaction. There's the end user, there's the OTT, and there's the telco. And so any model going forward has to be transparent and has to involve these three different stakeholders in terms of getting the model right to actually develop the service. And I would shy away from presenting this the way it was presented in the United States and North America, net neutrality debate, OTT versus telcos. Completely misguided, completely, ideological debate. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is. OTTs and telcos have a lot to, in terms of synergies, a lot of synergies to develop together. And so rather than seeing it as a kind of zero-sum game, I see it as a positive-sum game. Having said that, it's also important to shy away from the net neutrality terminology. Again, it's very specific to certain social activists who were able to shape the agenda in one market. And it's a language that was adopted by the FCC, unfortunately. Net neutrality, in terms of not blocking access, that's a normal demand, unless it's blocked by law and we all have to abide by it. These things don't come from operators. They come from the legislators in the country, the policymakers in the country. If it is about throttling, as long as it's unpredictable, non-transparent, discriminatory, then yes, that is a clear violation. If, however, there is a differentiated service that the OTT provider and the consumer know about and are able to price differently, then it's just a different product that is being provided to the market. You don't pay.
Can address some of these business logic.
But you cannot, just to use the analogy, other industries were given that opportunity. Today, you can drive from Abu Dhabi to Ras Al Khaimah, taking all the bypass road. It'll take you many more hours, or you can take Sheikh Zayed Road while going through Dubai and pay the toll. And you save time, and time is money. But you know that if you're going to go through these toll gates, you're going to pay so much. Airlines pay different prices for different slots, landing slots, parking slots. Container ships pay different fees depending on what time of day they come in, they dock in, and they dock out. Every single industry has faced this debate. But transparency is key, but one has to remember, again, this is not about, some ideology, and it's not about operators blocking anybody. It's about being able to provide different service depending on affordability, depending on willingness to pay, ability to pay. The decoupling of policy and regulation, I still think, is necessary. And regulators, having been a regulator, I would have benefited from having a clear policy to work with. I would have benefited from having a government or a policy maker as a counterpart discussing policy and then making policy, not in isolation of regulator from the regulators, but in consultation with the industry as a whole, all the stakeholders, and the regulator as well. I think ILED did not use a ministry, and I think Peter used that and said ministry. I'm not advocating any particular form of government for the industry. All I'm saying is there has to be a separate policy. And regulators, like any other civil servant, because regulators are civil servants in the end, have to be held accountable. You cannot hold them accountable unless there's something that holds them accountable and something to be held accountable against, which is in this case the policy. So yes, you can have it, and how do you produce that long-term vision? In most democracies, that's very difficult. But even democracies with short-term electoral cycles do come up with fiscal plans that are submitted to the IMF, do come up with long-term investment plans that are submitted to the World Bank, do produce, still mentioning India, an archaic 5-year plan, which has evolved, but still a 5-year plan. So every country will find a way to produce its own policy.
Another question.